Hi everyone, welcome. What I have planned for today is a check-in with the original red wiggler worms that live here in these two black tubs. And these systems have been in service for 172 days now. Fed 14 times. The last feeding was 14 days ago, 2 weeks ago. And I believe that the interval between feedings last time too was 2 weeks. So we're kind of sticking to a 2-week pause between feedings. And I'll tell you, my first impressions is holy dryness. I don't know. Usually in the summertime, I mean, it's already a couple weeks past Labor Day now, so summertime has come and gone technically. Well, not technically, unofficially. Technically, I think we're still in summer, at least for another week or so. But man, yeah, just the paper covering just wasn't really doing much in terms of protecting these systems from having their top surfaces get pretty dry. But you know, I mean, after 172 days, I would have to assume that the systems have some nice castings down low that are hopefully hanging on to their moisture without issue. So why don't we explore? Let's see how things look in here. I mean, last time we started out by, last time we made special we took special measures to try to make these outer edges of the bins a little bit more hospitable for worm traffic, because it seemed like when we would come out here to see how things were doing, we didn't see any worms, indicating to us that perhaps the material had grown too inhospitable for the worms to be out there, perhaps getting too dry or something, whatever the case may be. So we came in here with my spray bottle, and the outer edges of both of these bins got sprayed down pretty thoroughly with water. And you know, despite the fact that the top surface is pretty arid, it does seem like down low the material's very nice. I guess my only reason for concern here is that I am blending in all this very, very dry stuff that I'm dealing with out on the surface, getting blended into the material, which at the present time seems very comfortable from a moisture perspective for the worms. But once that dry stuff goes in there, I would assume it, you know, affects the overall moisture content of all the material around there as it all tries to equalize. So all the really nice damp stuff suddenly dries off a bit, giving up some of its moisture. And that's a pretty good sized stick. So many times I wonder, how do certain things make their way into my systems? And a stick like this, just, you know, the best explanation I can think of is that it was mixed in with some leaves that I might have bought in from outside once upon a time, which I don't go through that thoroughly, but I do usually grab each handful and give it a good squeeze to make sure well, not to make sure, because obviously things are slipping by, but in order to see if I've got anything like that, any sort of really large objects that might not want to be included in my leaves that I bring in here for use in my worm bins. Not sure if you can hear that on the video, but it had this really plasticky kind of sound to it. But it's my guess that this is just the skin of some sort of fruit or vegetable, which they've managed to eat all the soft stuff off of, still leaving that little bit of it right there to get polished off once it softens up enough for them to go for it. So yeah, I guess what I was sort of leading into was that even though I don't have my spray bottle out here on the bench, I'm thinking it might not be a bad idea to dampen a little bit in here just to compensate for the dry material I'm incorporating everywhere, just to make sure nothing suddenly goes from being comfortable to uncomfortable and then all the worms bug out because of what I just did here, blending in all the dry. So that to me sounds like a good idea. So we'll get the water bottle out here in a moment. I'd like to now go for the feeding zones and see how that feeding from 2 weeks ago is coming along. So the feeding would have been placed down the middle, even though there's no feeding zone indicator, which is something we see in some of my systems sometimes. We don't have them here. And yeah, there's definitely worms down in the feeding area. I hit some sort of a big clump of what appears to be paper. Just a big wad of material. But somehow, maybe something else in here? Some other material? I don't recall what the last feeding consisted of. Now this is very clearly identifiable as a stem of a pumpkin. So I don't know. It just felt like as I was breaking this apart, it wasn't paper tearing away or anything like that. There's like sort of like an interesting vegetable kind of springiness to it. And man, look at all these worms, you know. Definitely fun to have a nice big mound of worms in your hand and watch them squirm, but when they're huddled together like this, unless they're going for some really delicious food item, which is certainly a possibility, I think sometimes the other explanation is that they're a little bit distressed, and maybe that could just be maybe a lack of moisture. I'm definitely liking the idea of getting the water bottle out here and giving these guys a little bit of extra moisture. Alright, I'll usually let it go until this happens right here, where one of the little wormies manages to drop off my hand and land right there in between the systems. I wouldn't want to see the little guy squirm down there onto the dry paper and then I'd somehow miss him. But yeah, I have a feeling that maybe a little moisture wouldn't be a bad thing in here. I can almost hear the wormies sort of agreeing with me on that one. Alright, so some sort of other materials here that could be banana peels or something, kind of hard to tell. And a good bit of leftover bedding too from previous check-ins, which looks pretty good. So let's make sure we leave ourselves ample space down here to drop in today's feeding. But before we feed, we still got to go check out feeding zone in bin number 2. Let's see how things look down in here. A lot of times you would expect very similar things with a pair of bins that were launched on the same day with presumably the same size populations. I would think we'll probably encounter stuff similar to what we saw over there, and right away this springy material, I don't know what it is. It really makes me want to go check the video from last time to see what kind of stuff I fed last time, because that might be something I fed from last time and might have been something that I'm just unaccustomed to seeing in the worm bins. Pumpkin stem. And what else? Do we have huddling worms? Here's some more stuff like what we saw on the top surface. These chunks of the outer husk of the seed of a mango. Yeah, here too. Worms huddling and laying kind of low within the system. Kind of making me feel like perhaps either we compensate and plan to have a schedule of compensating for the moisture loss due to the paper only coverings, or maybe come in here with some plastic covers to help the system hang on to what moisture it's been given rather than letting it evaporate away. Although I am very pleased to see how nicely these castings are hanging on to their own moisture despite the little bit of neglect the top surface has received lately. Let's get to feeding these guys. I've got my prepared bedding here on the ready, so we'll grab some right here from the dividing line between the newly made from just a few days ago and the more seasoned stuff closer to my ungloved hand. And you know, before we write off this feeding zone as having sufficient bedding, why don't we give them some of this kind of bedding too. Some crumpled up napkin, but I even thought about putting it right there, and I will. But before I do that, I thought, what else could I do here before I start assembling this feeding zone? I'm thinking, even though my prepared bedding here is made with moisture, and even this batch was prepared with quite a bit of moisture, I'm thinking in this particular case it would be smart to add even more just to see if we can get the dampness down in the feeding zone perhaps a little higher than it normally would be in my systems. See if we can give these worms a little moisture haven to go relax in case a lack of moisture is what's giving them headaches. Well, as long as we're kind of just busy spraying here anyhow, let's get these recovered old objects from feedings gone by back down into the feeding zones. And then we can come in with today's yummy assortment. Alright, what do we have for them today? Fresh from the freezer. A nice assortment of different types of frozen materials. Definitely I can recognize these plums. Each will get a plum. And there might even be more plum in here. Yeah, I had a few of them that started getting a little bit moldy. So I picked out the seeds. These don't have their seeds in them. And I threw them in the freezer with the rest of the worm food. There's, it looks like the stem of a zucchini. There's definitely potato peel in here, a good bit of it. And I even recognize this, right? Cucumber. All kinds of yummy stuff for these little guys, and I bet you they're going to consider all that frost that's coming along for the ride as a nice little bonus too. Nice feeding. Alright. Kind of makes me even feel like dropping in perhaps another little bit of extra bedding for these little guys. Looks like they could use a bit more. I am glad to see how the material in general has a nice amount of bedding floating around within it. And I just really like how the material is nice and fluffy too. That's pretty nice as well. So, I don't want to skimp now on the application of even more moisture, so why don't we try this? The stuff out on the edges will get another little treatment of moisture as I sort of backfill the outer edges. So let's just drop some down in the hole. And then backfill, same over here. Yeah. And I always like to try to limit the number of things that I do to try to address certain matters, like in this case dryness. I guess I could also incorporate the coverings to include plastic, or maybe even swap out the existing coverings with plastic. But you know, at this point we're going to make one change at a time. In this case we're going to make that change the application of moisture, and we'll stick with the paper coverings for now, because despite the fact that the top surface did appear a little bit to be almost like a no man's land for the wormies, because I mean, way too dry, you know, they wouldn't be able to get out there and hang out much or for long. So having plastic coverings would definitely allow the top surface of the system to remain damp enough for worm traffic. So, you know, increasing the range, their ability to travel the entire system rather than being limited to sections down low where they're still comfortable from a moisture perspective. I don't know. Perhaps the time of year has come to switch back to plastic. I'm not running the heat in my house, so that wouldn't be the reason things are drying too rapidly. But luckily the humidity that comes in from outside has dropped greatly in the past few weeks. The hot and steamy days of summer seem to have subsided and the spring weather is rolling in. All right, everyone, I think we're almost done here. The top covering papers, you know, if they were covered in plastic, these things would be nibbled away within 1 or 2 check-ins, but since they're pretty dry, I mean very dry because they're exposed to the air, the paper definitely lasts. But I don't know, maybe we'll switch to plastic one of these days. For now, I think we're in good shape. Alright everyone, that's it for the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. Alright everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.